Welcome everybody. My name is Willem Rosenbrand and I will be moderating today. Thank you for joining us for the first lecture of the 56th VvTP Symposium. Moet even dit, sorry, 1 seconde. I will be moderating today. Thank you for joining us for the first lecture of the 56th VvTP Symposium, 2020Physion. We're very excited to show you what we have been working on towards this year. We hope you enjoy and learn a lot this week. We would love it if you turned on your camera. Do note that this lecture will be recorded and posted online. So if you don't feel comfortable with that, turn your camera off. During this week, we will look at current innovations with vision on the future. Each lecturer will share his or her vision with every lecture. This week, we will look further into the future. We hope this will guide you to develop your own vision. Today, our speaker is Engineer Willem Kesteloo. He was a physics student at the TU Delft, and during his master thesis, he co-created the startup PHYSEE. Here, he conducted research on energy generating windows, so-called SmartWindows. He will share how he's making his vision of accessible green energy without any compromise into reality. Before welcoming Willem, a short practical note. At the end of the lecture, there will be time to ask your questions. Please ask your questions in the Zoom general chat and also specify if you wish to ask these questions yourself or if we should ask it for you. Without any further ado, Willem Kesteloo.
Thanks, Willem. Just to check with you, can you hear me fine?
I can hear you fine, yes. Perfect.
Perfect. First of all, thanks all for the invite to the symposium committee. It's for me a great honor as I also hosted or co-hosted the VvTP Symposium once back in my student days. So nice to be here on the other side of the table. And excited to be sharing the vision of PHYSEE. It's already a bit hidden in our name. It comes from physics and seeing, means that we truly aim to change the perspective on how we look at problems, which is also what drove me to physics in the first place, this curiosity-driven approach. And basically what I love about physics is that for me at least, it tries to simplify reality in such a way so that we can hopefully understand its complex dynamics in the real world, which also brings me a bit into my own vision and passion and that of PHYSEE. But before diving in, I'd like to paint the context of what I'm talking about and what needs simplification to better understand it, which is our beautiful planet Earth, a hugely complex ecosystem. So starting with the first simplification is summarizing the 4 billion years of history of life on planet into one, and assuming that it's currently exactly midnight, New Year's Eve. And in that simplification, life on Earth was until October, so the entire history of life in 1 year, until October, it was only bacterial. And the dinosaurs only went extinct a few days ago, so the 25th of December. We humans only arrived about 1 hour ago, around 11 p.m. Only 2 minutes ago, we invented agriculture. And only some 30 seconds ago, we started using fossil fuels. And by the way, looking at the problem from this simplified energy balance is that by definition of the fact that we're using more energy than we produce, in the next 30 seconds or so, we will run out of fossil fuels. So that's the Happy New Year message from me. But thankfully, we have an alternative source. It's a huge nuclear fission reactor. We call it the sun. It's providing us with an abundance of energy for us to utilize in many ways, directly and indirectly, which brings me to the vision and passion, which I love to work on, is actually this energy puzzle with the boundary condition to inhabit our planet as a sustainable ecosystem again. The most straightforward approach in my perspective to go about this is the Trias Energetica. It's a model shown here, which basically says that the most sustainable form of energy is energy saved. It's a very obvious one, but it's usually forgotten. After which we should do all we can to produce what we still need sustainably, or for instance, from waste streams. and only using fossil fuel to sort of close the gap of the energy balance equation. However, when talking about visions for the future, I think we can adjust it accordingly a little bit by stating that in the end, we should completely close this gap sustainably. And for this, we need to focus on innovations rather than on fossil fuels. So with this context, let's dive into what we at PHYSEE stand for. And we start with the question, where can we save energy? And as you have to start somewhere, we started with what for us was the most obvious place to start, because we spent 90% of our time inside them, buildings. And because we spend 90% of our time inside, they're responsible for 40% of the global energy consumption worldwide. And by applying this simplification physics way of looking at the problem, we got to understand it a bit better, because if you think about it, all these energy losses, they have to go somewhere. And they can only go out through the facade. Both the heat and cold losses, they have to escape somewhere. And then by looking at these losses through the facade, you can imagine that all these losses will prefer to leave through the least insulated parts. That's easiest. So in other words, all losses will go out the window, pun intended. But if you look at Windows, it hasn't really adapted to these losses over the last 5,000 years. So in our view, Windows are ready for a technological upgrade, so to speak. So we started by concretizing the problem, simplify. So we developed an algorithmic software to be able to make a 3D digital twin from technical drawings. And secondly, from these digital twins, we developed simulations for the climate conditions of this building based on location, orientation, design, etc. And from there, we can calculate the exact energy losses per facade element over the year with sufficient resolution. And finally, we developed, or are developing, I must say, a parametric software for the electrical planning tooling for the installation applications in the facade. So what we can do now is that we can calculate the energy problem for every building everywhere with a high enough resolution, for which we developed the first part of the solution directly at the root cause of the problem in the windows. So by incorporating sensors inside the windows with solar cells to power these sensors, but also various facade applications, we can start to proactively respond to the problem, similar to how your skin does this for your body. So based on sensory input from your skin, your body instantly knows locally where to sweat or where to goosebump. And with the least amount of energy, it keeps your body at a nice, steady indoor climate of about 37 degrees. So introducing our smart skin is where we try to achieve the same. So with our sensor and power technology incorporated in the windows, we can let our facade work for you autonomously, proactively, and importantly, also locally, by dynamically responding to changes inside and outside the building. And with this, our smart skin currently can save up to 25% of the total energy consumption of a building by controlling your sun blinds per window and thermostat per room and learning from it, which we have been also ourselves. We have been able, or we have been allowed to install already throughout the Netherlands, somewhat around 7,000 square meters of our smart skin, both in renovation and in construction projects, and both for residential as well as for commercial buildings. Which brings us a bit to the second part of the equation, because we believe that with continuous improvements, we might be able to, let's say, double the amount of savings, but even 50% energy savings won't make the building energy neutral or energy positive yet. So after optimizing for consumption, we also really need to look at production and how to add it to the equation. So let's again first focus on windows because they are the only thing increasing in buildings. I'll explain that a bit. So if you look at buildings, traditionally, the roof surface size or the relative roof surface is decreasing, but also the closed parts of the facade are becoming less and less because we're building more and more with windows, despite their currently poor energy performance. But the one thing you need to know about windows is that the surface, so the glass, needs to reflect 30% of the energy from the sun hitting the window in order to be able to offer the required insulation value of windows, which, when looking at it from this simplified perspective, seems like a huge waste stream, like reflecting this 30% of energy in order to keep it insulating. So we figured, can we not capture this fraction of energy and redirect it to the edges where we have already these solar cells that power the sensors in the facade and can then additionally produce a lot more energy. So we are developing all these coatings in the labs of Peter Dorrebos at the Delft Institute, the Reactor Institute, as well as where we do all our characterization and testing of the coatings on stability and production methods, etc. With the goal of producing invisible coatings for the human eye, so invisible, just as invisible as glass, which still reflects this 30%, but then our coating is equally invisible, but absorbs this fraction and redirects it to the edges, which is what you can see in these little prototypes. So you see it's sort of at the edges that they glow up, which means that all the light is transported to the edges. And we are now testing it in the field also for the first time. So on the left, you see the first prototypes. In the middle, you see them being installed in the first test facility in Spain. And on the right, you see a building in Sevilla where we will do the first pilot project of 30 windows, summer 21. So hopefully these developments will lead to a more energy production part of the equation in addition to the savings. But regardless, in our view, all these efforts also inspire a lot of innovation in general. So first and foremost in our current value proposition, such as improving our algorithms or adding sensor technology inside the buildings to also be able to account for the human element in the building consumption, or the different application methods for the coatings to be able to serve the entire glass industry and not only the sputtering part, for instance. But these activities also lead to innovations outside of traditional buildings, and one of which I would like to share because it's somehow related. So it still focuses on buildings, but then fully transparent buildings, and not buildings for humans, but buildings for plants. Greenhouses. So a very cool discovery with another luminescent compound is that this compound is able to capture only the UV light and then re-emit this in the visible light, which would not necessarily have an application in traditional buildings. However, plants really hate UV and they need visible light to grow. So instead of scattering this light to the edges, we found a way to decouple the light downward, which means that we can increase the light that makes crops grow up to 10%. Making it an awesome sustainable innovation leading back to the agriculture and food challenges, which are directly linked to the sustainable energy challenges in terms of resources or for instance, surface area of the planet. Which brings us a bit to where we are today, but also to the part of the presentation I actually wanted to share with you, because this is very much narrated in the wrong perspective. When looking back, it's always easy to find the common thread, but the truth is that it wasn't all that pretty. I think reality looks more like this. Looking back in time, it's always easy, but experiencing the journey as you go, it's just a lot more messy and unclear, especially when doing research or development, especially when doing hardware and electronics, and especially when being active in the real estate industry. So we actually started on Thulium already over 6 years ago, where Erik van der Kolk already worked on it for another couple of years, thinking it was going to be smooth sailing from there. And if you would have told us back then that we would be developing self-learning algorithms for digital building twins to calculate the energy potential of facades and develop an app to show the performance of our smart skin on the energy savings of that same building, we would really not have believed you. But it turned out to be necessary. So we really started the traditional way of starting a startup. We rented an anti-squatting office without heating or furniture. We wrote our first business plan on how to change the world with gloves and a hat on, as you can see in the bottom left. We built our first MVP, how they call it in startup language, which actually means a prototype that doesn't work, to prove what we wanted to develop and show that it would work in the future. We actually won quite a bit of student competitions and prizes, and really testing out our business model and figuring out how we wanted to develop. We got some initial funding from the government to start testing and building real windows. But that was also when the first reality check kicked in, because selling windows turned out to be a lot harder than we thought. We decided to start simple, to first make some normal windows with maybe a little solar cell strip in between to see how you make a window with technology in it. We tried to sell it to a launching customer to see if we were able to meet industry requirements, so certification, installation, and of course, a lot of people said no, but eventually we managed to sell 10 of these windows to actually the most famous Dutch real estate developer at the time, OVG Real Estate, currently called Edge Technologies. We could use it for an actual client of them, the Rabobank, also a very prominent name in the industry. After which we got to work for, I think, some 4 months on our first window. So really sweat and tears, because it turns out selling windows is hard, but building them even harder. Only to learn that the whole operational side after making a window was even harder. So this is where a lot of things went wrong. I can still hear the sound of this first window that we ever built, which should have been installed on the development side of our client the very next day. But this is just the symbolic image of all our trial and error. So also the coating development took a lot longer than we expected, and making it stable in its right divalent state turned out to be a lot harder than expected. Or figuring out that the industry actually doesn't want to pay for sustainability that much was something we learned. Or that companies in the real estate industry preferably don't work with startups because it's too risky for them, because they build a building for 50 or 60 years. They don't want to bet or be dependent on a startup that's been around for maybe 2 years. Or that those who pay for our solution should also really reap the benefits of the solution. It doesn't work if one needs to decide, another one needs to pay, and another one has all the benefits, because then nobody's really gonna choose for our solution, pay for it, only to have somebody else exploit the benefits. So we had to continuously go back to the drawing board. We had to pivot from a fundamental research company focused on light conversion coatings to really adding software and hardware and electronics and tooling in order to get our technology from the lab into a building. And in doing so, we sort of parallel had to continuously pivot our business model also before figuring out what the industry was actually willing to accept. We learned that in order to do it right, we had to make our own sensor hardware and solar hardware for the first times, because you cannot expect others to build it for you to your own requirements. The same with installing. In order, when we first gave our windows to installers, they put them in upside down and with the wire going out instead of going in. If you how can this go wrong? But yeah, those things apparently go wrong if you don't tell them exactly what to do, or if you do it for them the first couple of times. But I think in the end, we made some initial progress. We were allowed to install our first Windows, and after which we were allowed to install our first pilot projects, after which we were allowed to install our first large-scale smart skin projects. And I guess that's a bit of the key takeaway for me in defining a vision or defining a passion is I think it's crucial to really for yourself define what do I think is important or where do I want to focus my energy and resources on. But it's the first step. It's a crucial step, but it's the first. And I think the actual purpose that you can derive from your passion or vision is all the other steps after you have identified this first step, for better or for worse. Because I think, as we discussed, in the present moment, you really never know where you are. Those things will only be easy when you look back to say, oh yeah, then this happened and this happened. And that's why I'm currently here. But in the moment, you don't know if you're at a sort of local minima or if you're slowly are able to look across the horizon already. So I think my sort of 2 cents on this whole analogy and on how to go about it with these uncertainties is to take that second step. Don't wait for another or better time for it. It won't come. There's always later. But what I do really, really recommend is to find others around you with whom you can share this same vision and passion on your first step, because it is with them that you can really go to such a journey with all the, well, the highs are easy, but with all the lows where you really need each other. Because if I look at our case, I think there wasn't a week or a month where people told us to stop or to forget about it and it's never going to work. And it's so easy to say no, especially from the outside. This is not going to work. And especially clients or investors, they pride themselves by trying to figure out why things won't work. So you really need those who can help figure things out that might work. If you knew for sure it was going to work, it probably has already been done. So don't wait until something is perfect. And I think it's also the most rewarding and fun part of it, to find these people to go on this adventure together. At PHYSEE, we really like word jokes. So the first software we did was called a feasibility check, because it's a feasibility check. The parking spots in our office are called VvTP, so only the Dutch understand it, but we don't care, we like it. But we also call those in our team visionaires, which I think is a nice way to end this presentation, given the word joke you put in this symposium on vision. Because in the end, we at PHYSEE believe that it's all about people. A great team will be able to pivot and adapt relentlessly until they make it right, but a shitty team will ruin any chance on impact, no matter how great the solution is they're trying to achieve. That's it. Thank you, and looking forward to any of your questions.
Yeah, thank you, Willem. It was really interesting. I loved it. It was really nice. So as promised, we are going to hold a small discussion.
Yeah.
I think I'll start. If people have any questions, please send them in the chat and tell us if you want to ask it yourself or if I ask it for you. Be really nice. Thank you. But first, I would like to ask, what do you think? I know it's difficult if you're emerging and you're a startup still, and it's really difficult to get people to build, to get to put in your windows in a building. It's difficult, but where do you think it will be in 20 years? like in like
Wow.
for 2050? Do you think it'll be help? It can help the green energy transition in any way, feasible way?
Yes, I think it was Bill Gates or something that we always overestimate what you can do in a month, but you underestimate what you can do in 5 years. So 20 years from now or 20, I really don't know, but I hope that by then we figured out a way to, without compromising on sort of our status quo and way of living, but to be fully in harmony with our ecosystems on energy and food and biodiversity, you name it. I think, yeah, relating it back to us and what we're working on, I think within the next 5 or 10 years, technology will be a huge part of building facades, and especially or also windows. And I hope we can play a big role in it by adding sensor and solar technology inside windows. But if not us, I'm sure others will, because it's such a huge untapped potential so far. And I think more and more stakeholders see it. So when we started off 6 years ago, we went by the 4 largest glass manufacturers. It's a heavily consolidated market. So it's the 4 biggest glass manufacturers. They own about 80% of the global glass production market. So not windows, but really turning sand into glass. And in the beginning, they all really treated us like a sort of laughing stock and thought, yeah, forget it, it's not going to happen. And already 5, 6 years later, they changed. So they are starting to see, hey, wait a minute, if we add more functionality to glass, it's a more high-end product. We can have more healthier business cases surrounding the value proposition of glass. Now it's sort of a cost for a building, but if we add functionality, it becomes a more integral part of your build. So I think it's changing already. And I think a lot will change, or I hope a lot will change in the next 5 or 10 years. But then again, I also thought we would be a lot further in 2 years than we are now in 6 years. So things take time. So hopefully in 2030, at least buildings are energy positive. And hopefully as much of the society as possible. So
yeah, very nice. I think we have some questions. Hilda, do you want to unmute people? Get like I don't know. What do you think? You can do it. Yeah. All right. You can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question.
Can everyone understand me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much, Willem. This was Willem Kesteloo. Thanks for the other Willem as well. But I was just, yeah, I just wanted to compliment on the fact that you seem like a rare breed of applied physics alumni that actually sort of starts off with a vision and then proceeds to use whatever tools he has to make an amazing product out of it and change a system for the better. Personally, as a bachelor physics student, I find that very hard to encounter. And now that I'm sort of orienting myself towards a master, I'm really doubting whether I should choose applied physics, which you have done. And I was just wondering, in the field of physics, as a entrepreneur, as I would like to call you, and you probably do yourself, is it a fruitful area to be an entrepreneur, to create a company, to think in these completely new, novel, interesting ways? Or would you say that there's so much on the table and this just happens to be a certain expertise that I have?
Thanks, Tim. It's such a great question. I struggled with exactly the same. I even found the Bachelor of Applied Physics extremely hard. Like there was so much distraction, moving on to live by yourself and being part of a city life in Delft and combining life with studies. So I decided for my bachelor thesis to go abroad, to really spend focused time on my thesis. And I got the opportunity to go to San Francisco and focus really on biophysics. I thought that's where my passion is, so turning physics to understand biology. Over there, I learned it was not my passion, but there I got in touch with a lot of more other, sort of passion-driven type of physicists. And they were really saying like, hey, this energy problem, is that not something to sink our teeth in? So I did a sort of back and forth with a lot of friends who started either the applied physics master or others. So also the SET master, so sustainable energy technologies, and somebody told me that really you should look at the applied physics master as a gift after surviving the bachelor. So with that advice, I said, okay, well, at least I'm going to try it. And if I don't like it after a year, there's always room to switch, and maybe you can take some courses into a next program.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, the experience was exactly that. So it was still, of course, there were a few tough courses, usually with the name advanced for it. But for the rest, you're completely free to pick your own field of interest and to really go into these in-depth, more fundamental discussions with professors and postdocs, and sort of this whole romantic image of deciding yourself a bit what the curriculum could be. I enjoyed it very much, and I found it a lot more easy in that sense to commit to, and then also get more and more positive feedback loops going, which made me really enjoy the master and the freedom to choose your direction. So I don't think it's the best entrepreneurial program out there, but I think you can make most out of it for sure.
Yeah. No, I think something that's a real struggle for a lot of people is that the bachelor is very rigid. You know, you don't have a choice. And that really limits sort of the time you can put into something that you really adore spending in.
And I think it's sort of forced, right? Back in the days, I think the system was 4 years, and then it allowed for some freedom, but then government said, no, you have to squeeze it in 3. So they all forced sort of this is the basics you need to understand about physics before we can give you a bachelor degree. So there's no room to sort of be flexible on the program. Whereas with the masters, they have a lot more freedom to do so. So they offer you a lot more choice and packages.
No, okay, that's.
I really enjoyed it a lot more than my bachelor, to be honest. Yeah,
good to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for the question.
Thank you.
Can you mute yourself again, Tim? Yes. Evert, I think you have a question. Can you unmute yourself, or you want me to ask? Yeah. Hello.
Yes, can I talk to you?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, perfect.
Okay. Well, I was wondering what the influence on this concept is of the application of triple glazing, because you do not have the edge then as a whole to use as PV cells. And well, maybe it offers opportunities, but also difficulties, maybe. So that was my question.
Thanks, Evert. Yeah, you answered it already as how I would answer. I think it's a challenge to adapt our technology from double to triple glazing, but we also see an opportunity in it. So basically, in the glass industry, they call every precision where you can apply a coating, they give it a number. So 1 is the glass facing outside, 2 is inside the cavity, 3 the other side of the cavity, 4 inside the building, and then with triple glazing you add 5 and 6 to it. So by definition you have sort of 2 more sides to put different coatings on for different functionalities. So you can really increase sort of your reflective coatings or insulation coatings, but also our light conversion coatings. But then the challenge is really how to direct the light as efficiently as possible to our solar cells. So in our first product, so really the smart window, we positioned the solar cells and sensor technology in the cavity. But now with the prototypes of our power windows, so really with the coating and light towards the edges, we moved the solar cells from the cavity to under the glass directly, so that the light sort of really hits the solar cell directly to increase the efficiency. So that challenge will remain the same if it's double or triple paint, because the solar will be under the glass anyways. But for the smart window, there's a lot of opportunity. So we made, for instance, one smart window where we have our strip of sensor and solar cell technology at the bottom, but then we already include, for instance, sun blinds above it in the cavity. And we are now talking with another company that in the second cavity could also add, for instance, liquid crystals. So that with our power produced, you can make your window tintable, so that to avoid heat coming in the summer, you can make it darker. And in the winter, you want natural heating to enter, you can make it transparent again. It's sort of the airplane windows on the new Boeing chromatic glass. So for us, it's still an opportunity to develop more value out of triple paint versus double paint, but it was definitely, or it is definitely a challenge. Yeah.
Okay. Well, hearing you talking brings me to another question, if I'm allowed by the moderator. You sound rather technology driven.
Yeah.
Well, you have to look for applications where this product is optimally applicable, and the edge conditions of application in buildings, for instance, and well, what I'm thinking about is in many buildings, people like to have some contact with the environment, not only visual, but also well, feeling fresh air coming in, etc. How do you deal with this division between the technology drive and the, let's say, environment drive and application drive?
Another great question, and it's a continuous challenge. I think it's on different dimensions. It's a challenge. So really, we started the two of us, both physics engineers, really tech driven.
Yes.
But we need to become what they call solution driven. So that's for us really a fluffy term, but we slowly are starting to understand that the market doesn't want a technology, they want a solution for their problem.
Yeah.
And that's something we're still learning, and I think we have still a lot of learning to do, but we are slowly starting to understand this transition on how to turn a product company into a more customer focused or client engaged type of solution company. And the first let's say benefit of this transition was indeed the fresh air analogy that you suggested. So this year we started to develop a smart skin functionality where we can link our smart skin technology not only to the sun blinds or the thermostat, but also to natural air. So both for ventilation, but also for opening and closing a window. So that if our window notices, hey, the inside quality is poor, why not open the window a little bit, which normally a human also does, but we do it too late. So we do it already when the air quality is really low. So in that way, we try to combine solving the challenge from both the client perspective as well as from a technology.
Yeah, and the clients, people want to control.
That's
a complication, I think.
Yeah.
And well, adding to what you said, that you want solution driven. In many cases, you will have to invent the problem even yourself.
Yeah.
Because people do not always know what their problem is.
I think that was Henry Ford who said it. I would have asked the people what they wanted, they would have asked more horses.
Yeah.
And not the car he invented. So also very true, but it's really hard. It's a balance between asking what their problem is and offering them a solution to a problem they didn't know they had. Yeah.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, and wish you very good luck with
thank
your
you very
company.
much, Evert.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Evert. Very interesting, really interesting question. Can you mute yourself again? Yeah, thank you. Milo, you have a question. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, so yeah, my name is Milo, and I'm just starting out with my Bachelor of Applied Physics. And
Nice.
I just saw your talk, and I was amazed, and I really I want to ask you that for me, the transition from having high school students around me and now having university students around me is quite a change. And I was wondering, yeah, how did you kind of get your ideas to start this company or ideas or movement, and with who did you really start first? Because I now have a lot of more motivated students around me, and I was just wondering, like, how did it all came to be that you now have this amazing startup company?
Thanks. Thanks, Milo. Yeah, I think I'm thinking real hard, but I think the analogy that comes closest is dating. So in order to find your partner, you first really need to know what you want, which means you really need to know who you are before you can enter into a healthy relationship. They also would really like to know you. So I think for me, in the beginning of my bachelor's, I had no clue, obviously, on what my own motivations or drives or interests were. And I think that was sort of the upside of a rigid program like the bachelor's, that at least the program helps you figure out all the different elements of in this case, physics, but I think the same goes to any study program. It guides you a bit along the classical principles, biophysics, quantum, everything. And I think that's sort of a let it sink in approach, at least from my perspective, just to figure out what sparks your imagination and interest. And for me, it only turned active after or during my bachelor thesis. And I think that varies per person. Some people already know when they start studying, like, I'm going to study this to be able to. But for me, that really only in the beginning, it was really exploration and a lot of dates or dating. And I think with my bachelor thesis, I had my first love affair with biophysics, but that didn't work out, as they say. But it did show me and learn me my true passion for the energy transition puzzle. And only then and there, so during the master thesis I entered, that was really tailored to this specific solution space, to this problem that I really wanted to contribute to, is where I met my current partner in crime, Ferdi. And I think Ferdinand and I, we knew each other, like we both studied the same, we did some courses together even in our masters, but it only also for us really clicked in this sort of drive to make this technology happen. And I think, yeah, that's sort of also with dating. Sometimes you can date for years before you fall in love, and sometimes you know it on the first date. So it's a very vague answer, but it's also a very hard question. This is sort of the best I can give you. Yeah,
I could imagine it's quite hard to really formulate how did it all started. But I guess to conclude, what you said is to just try out a lot of things, see what makes you drive, and especially try out a lot of people, change ideas, and then hopefully one day you'll find that click, and you just have to go with it.
I think Phil Dunphy from Modern Family has a book called The Philosophies, so his philosophy, and he says that happiness is reality minus expectations. So I think the more open-minded you enter into these questions and journeys, the more, yeah, I don't know, fruitful it might be.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
That's
you.
a hard question, yeah.
We might have time for one more short question. Anyone has like a question that might take like 2 minutes to answer? We have time. Matthias, maybe? Do you have you want to ask your question? Matthias Fleur?
Yeah, so I was wondering, sorry, I'm gonna mute my sound. Yeah, so we saw on one slide that one of the windows has like 15 years of stability. So does that mean that you have to renew these windows after 15 years? And also, do you choose, let's say, the best window according to its own carbon footprint, for example?
Yeah, cool question also. So we, Koen from our team, just Friday presented the updated LCA of our smart skin as a whole. So the whole proposition of our smart skin, it's a life cycle analysis to really figure out the carbon footprint of all the different application spaces. And the coating itself, it's now set at the durability of 15 years or more, which is sort of the industry standard certification requirement for any coating on glass. So a traditional insulation glass unit also has like 9 or 10 coatings on it, which are these reflective coatings or insulation coatings. So they should at least be stable for 15 years or more. So we just figured, yeah, we want to be on that same level for our coatings before allowing them into the market. And I think sort of relating that to the question of the carbon footprint, for us, that's the most important part of the proposition, right? So that the solution itself has the highest sustainable impact. So for us, that would definitely be the most important way to measure the impact of the different coating developments or solar cell developments. For the client, it's more the return on investment metric. So for them, it's currently still very much price value driven. So they'd rather have a cheaper window that produces more electricity, which has a higher footprint, as opposed to a more expensive window with lower electricity production, but also a lower footprint. But I think this is sort of where the industry is slowly changing part of the discussion. That I think 6 years ago, it was only return on investment. Maybe now it's sort of return on investment and payback. That sort of also there is a sustainability element in their decision-making process. Yeah, and hopefully I think sort of the carbon footprint will be calculated into the costs of our products. I think that's in general a great way to level the playing field again, is yeah, to take into account the carbon costs of our products and take those into account in the price we need to pay for them. That also your phone or your car, that there's a carbon tax incorporated in the price, because I'm afraid the market itself won't pay for it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Very nice. Well, thank you everybody for asking these really interesting questions, and thank you.
Yeah.
And sorry that not everybody could ask their question. I see there's one more, but we don't have any more time. But thank you for sticking around to the end of the first lecture by Willem Kesteloo of our physics symposium. We would love to see you tomorrow for a second, more hands-on lecture by Dr. Maria Sovago. She will try to help you find your own vision. For more information about that, head to our website. It's also in the email, but it's symposium.vvtp.tudelft.nl. Thank you, and until tomorrow, you may leave the Zoom lecture now. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Very nice.
Bye-bye.